At exactly 2:30 in the morning, something went catastrophically wrong. But the people living just a few kilometers away were never told the truth. They slept peacefully, while an invisible threat spread through the air, the streets, the playgrounds, and into their bodies. Then, suddenly, an announcement. Not a warning, not an explanation, just a command. You have 24 hours to leave your city. No one was allowed to ask questions. No one was allowed to stay behind. And most terrifying of all, they were told they would come back soon. They never did. Today, this city still exists, untouched, abandoned, frozen in time. Clothes still hang in closets, school books remain open on desks. A Ferris wheel never carried its first passenger. And what happened during those final hours, what authorities saw but never fully admitted, is far more disturbing than the evacuation itself. Stay until the end, because the final detail of this story explains why this city could never be reoccupied, and why it still isn't safe decades later. The city was called Pripyat. It didn't grow slowly over centuries like most cities. It was designed, planned, and built from scratch in the 1970s. Pripyat was meant to represent the future. Modern apartment blocks, wide streets, parks, schools, hospitals, cinemas, sports complexes. The average age of its residents was just 26 years old. Young families, engineers, scientists, teachers. It was a city full of optimism. But Pripyat existed for one reason and one reason only: to serve a nearby structure that symbolized both human genius and human arrogance: the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant. 4 massive reactors stood just outside the city. They provided jobs, stability, and pride. What no one living in Pripyat fully understood was that the city's fate was completely tied to what happened inside those reactors. And on April 26, 1986, that bond became a death sentence. Shortly after 1 a.m., engineers inside reactor number 4 began a safety test. The goal was simple: to see whether the reactor could maintain cooling power during an emergency shutdown. But what followed was a perfect storm of human error, design flaws, and dangerous decisions. Control rods were removed, safety systems were disabled, warnings were ignored. At 12:23 a.m., the reactor became unstable. Seconds later, a massive explosion tore through the building. The reactor core was exposed directly to the atmosphere. A second explosion followed. What erupted into the sky wasn't smoke. It was radioactive material launched thousands of meters into the air. Inside the control room, operators didn't immediately realize what had happened. Some believed the reactor was intact. Others knew the truth, but it was already too late. Outside, a strange blue glow filled the night sky. Residents of Pripyat gathered on balconies to watch, unaware that what they were witnessing was silently poisoning them. Here's the part most people don't realize. The explosion happened at 12:23 a.m. The evacuation did not begin until more than 36 hours later. For an entire day and a half, life in Pripyat continued almost normally. Children went to school, people went to work, couples walked outside, breathing contaminated air. Authorities debated, Reports were delayed. The scale of the disaster was downplayed. Radiation detectors maxed out and were dismissed as faulty. By the time the truth became impossible to hide, radiation levels were already lethal in some areas. And then, finally, the order came. On April 27th, loudspeakers echoed through the city. A calm official voice delivered the message. Due to an accident at the Chernobyl Nuclear Power Plant, temporary evacuation is necessary. Temporary. Residents were told to bring documents, essentials, and food for a few days. They were told they would return soon. Buses flooded the streets, over 1,200 of them arriving from across the region. Families boarded in silence. Pets were left behind. Food remained on tables. Windows were left open. Many residents didn't even lock their doors. Why would they? They were coming back. But as the last bus pulled away, Pripyat became something else entirely. A city with no living inhabitants. What makes Pripyat so haunting isn't just that it was abandoned, it's how quickly it happened. Classrooms still display lessons on chalkboards. Hospitals still contain medical equipment. Apartments still hold family photos, toys. Calendars stopped on April 1986. The amusement park scheduled to open just days later never officially opened. The Ferris wheel became one of the most recognizable symbols of the disaster. Bright, playful, silent. Nature slowly began to reclaim everything. Trees grew through concrete, animals returned, buildings decayed. But beneath the surface, danger remained. Radiation soaked into the soil, walls, and metal. And some places inside the city became so contaminated that entering them for minutes could be fatal. After the evacuation, a new group arrived. They were called liquidators. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers, firefighters, miners, and civilians. Their mission: contain the disaster. They shoveled radioactive debris. They drained contaminated water. They built a massive concrete structure over the reactor, the sarcophagus. Many were given little protection. Some were sent onto the roof of the reactor for 90 seconds at a time, because that was the maximum their bodies could survive. Thousands later developed severe illnesses. Many died young. Their sacrifice prevented a catastrophe far worse than what already occurred, but it came at a devastating human cost. So why was Pripyat never resettled? The answer is simple and terrifying. Radioactive isotopes like cesium-137 and strontium-90 have half-lives lasting decades. Some materials in the area will remain dangerous for hundreds, even thousands of years. Certain buildings absorbed radiation into their very structure. No amount of cleaning could make them safe. Even today, visiting Pripyat requires strict rules, limited time, and constant monitoring. This wasn't just an evacuation, it was a permanent exile. Pripyat stands today as a monument, not just to a nuclear disaster, but to secrecy, to denial, to the cost of silence. An entire city erased in 24 hours, lives displaced forever, and a reminder that some mistakes cannot be undone, no matter how advanced we believe ourselves to be. The people of Pripyat were told they'd return. They never did, and their empty city still whispers a warning, one the world should never forget.